Welcome, everyone. This is Danny and Karl with Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with our channeling series. And today, Karl is going to channel Murray Rothbard. Some claim is the father of anarcho capitalism, and he's from the Austrian School of Economics, and he was a protege, a student of Mises, and so it's called the Austrian School of Economics. And he died in 1995 at the age of 68. He was kind of on the fringes of academia, but well respected in his area of expertise. Quite a guy. He was a prolific writer. I think he wrote over 20 books. He helped Lou Rockwell start the Lou Rockwell site, which is a kind of a portal for people who are the libertarian bent, or what they call anarcho-capitalists, and just an amazing guy, an amazing, prolific fellow who could do public speaking. He didn't have a really good public speaking voice, but his writing was amazing. They say he could write books, and you'd pick up what he wrote, and very little of it needed any editing whatsoever. Amazing guy. I've known about him for over 20 years now, and I've read a bunch of his books. His epic tome is this here, Man, Economy, and State. I think it's probably as thick as a Bible. It's amazing. But this was his, I think it took him 7 years to write this. And I think he started in earnest on this in 1952. And
I've read 7 years to read it. So
yeah, or in my case, 10. Yeah. And I'm a pretty fast reader. So yeah, and I have not read this. I've read parts of it. I have read this, This is for it's called For a New Liberty. And I've read another one that was my favorite. It's called Egalitarianism, Revolt Against Nature. So anyway, that's who Karl's going to channel today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Karl, for doing this with us week after week after week after week. I think we're up around 200 channeling subjects now. I haven't done a count, but I think that's what I'm hearing in the birds twittering in the trees saying, wow, they've done 200, or we're getting close to 200, something like that. But thank you. And so I think we've had some channeling subjects like this, but maybe not quite Murray Rothbard.
Yeah, I think he is unique in some ways. We have talked about the financial system and the idea of money a bit here and there because it does come up. This is a kind of point of juxtaposition, universally because of the way the world runs. So there's always issues about money. And so someone who is historically on record as a deep thinker on the subject is a good person to talk to. And this is what we've seen play out in our channeling series, that when we go to the light and check in with someone who's lived before, they have a karmic history and an interconnection with what they were doing here as a human being, and it gives them a kind of voice, a kind of platform, because they had skin in the game, so to speak, and they not only were versed in understanding things from that human perspective, maybe being an expert in some arena, but also as a light being now, they can look down with a divine level perspective and integrate that with the broader themes and the broader issues we have, trying to understand the world in a deeper sense, and the divine realm, and our destiny, and what we're dealing with in all of the cultural difficulties and the points of friction that keep dragging us down over and over again. So people like him, I think, are very rewarding to talk to because of that involvement, prior presence here, having a stake in things and having contributed in one way or another. And often we've learned these people are not just people, they're actually agents of the divine in their role in life. Mm-hmm. And so that also is why they can be an eloquent spokesperson now. Right. Because they've come, they've lived it, they've experienced it firsthand, and they go back to the light and they can reflect on all that happened and speak even more intelligently than maybe before they would have been able to. And in that particular aspect of life and the world events they were privy to. And everyone is an Earth Watcher up there, so we have come to find. They right. See everything that goes on. There's no secrets. Yeah. Everything is open to inspection, and they're watching us avidly, and largely to cheer us on, to learn more and do it better, and work for the divine and the cause of the divine, to bring it forward and counter this retreat that we're in right now with the secular movement.
Right. And it's interesting because you say the secular movement, and here's a guy who said he claimed for himself that he was more of an agnostic. Mm-hmm. And we've had other channeling subjects like that too. And they've been kind of ambivalent about God and not really religious or whatever. But there was an aspect of their lives, their livelihood, and what they were doing that was divinely aligned. And I find that very interesting, that we always think of like, well, divine alignment means they have some kind of religious component in their life, and they were referring to God, or they had a prayer life or something like that. Not always necessarily the case.
Well, we know that infiltration is a time-honored strategy in organizations of all kinds. We have FBI informants who are part of criminal rings for a while to gather data and information and maybe influence and talk people out of things, we would hope. And there can be divine infiltrators, and they don't actually know it because they are born like everyone else, not aware of their history. but they get guidance along the way. And as they have an affinity for a certain arena and come to be involved in it, they're getting some help from their higher self largely, and then creator at times as well, to have insights and opportunities to think about a question that's put to them for them to ruminate on. And this is how the divine works. They don't control us,
Right.
but they make offerings and reminders and sometimes hints and nudges a little bit, but they have to let us have our head. And that's a dangerous idea right there. You can see how it's going.
Right.
A lot of people are running amok, but this is the way it works. And there is a purpose behind it all. So we can learn from everyone we talk to who's now in the light, and they know much more than we do about all that's going on, and particularly the reality of the divine. And this is the thing; it's so maddening. And he's a good example in his life. Kind of, I'm not so sure about all that God stuff.
Yeah.
That, and I understand that. I've had those times in my life as well, because it's easy to be cynical because there's so much evil and negativity, and the proof of the divine is very elusive. It's all anecdotal.
Right.
Unless you experience a miracle firsthand, and they're relatively uncommon, and often they're diffuse. They're not so overt that you see, oh, that's a miracle, no question. No, it's just something broke your way that is just unexpected and marvelous, but you can't prove that was God's doing.
Yeah, and in the circle, Murray Rothbard circle, with the economists and the academia folks and the guys trying to woo the universities and everything, they felt like they were in an area where that question didn't really need to be approached. They talked about the philosophies of government, and he in one of his book right here, it says man, economy, and state. And the state, has an unfortunate history along with religion, as a pair and individually. And there was a guy who's also pretty famous in that same group, Walter Block. Their contention is that anything the state can do, the private sector can do better and cheaper, and probably with less corruption. And they have some pretty convincing arguments for making that claim. Walter Block was one of them. But when it came to the idea of God and religion, Walter's response was, well, that's like a fish needing a bicycle. They're not related. Well, it turns out they're very related. As as we have learned from and that's why I'm so interested to talk to him, because all of those guys, brilliant men, really that was one thing common throughout, is that we don't need to talk about God here. We can talk about religion. I mean, we can talk about liberty. We can talk about man. We can talk about economy. We can talk about the state, and we never even have to broach the subject. And I think their take on it now would be very different. That's my suspicion, my prediction.
Everyone has blind spots, and as part of culture, there are cultural blind spots. Entire nations and the world as a whole has huge blind spots, and that is orchestrated. It's a cultivation through mind control manipulation to make people unable even to think about certain ideas and concepts.
Or connect certain dots.
Nothing is normal in the earth plane, and it's as you were talking about the learned individuals in his circle, I was thinking about my own experience as a scientist, and one of the thoughts I had is, well, you haven't seen anything until you've sat in a room full of professors of academic medicine. You talk about arrogant, pompous know-it-alls. They could be very nice folks. I mean, I don't mean to be totally pejorative and judgmental here, but it's the idea of their framework, their perspective. It's all materialism. It's all what you can see and touch and feel, probe with a scientific tool. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. That's a huge blind spot, and it's holding back medicine and many other aspects of scientific inquiry. And so why should it be different in any other arena? And I assure you it isn't. So I hope we'll get some discussion about that as a general theme too, because it applies really to a lot of what humans are involved with. It's kind of an object lesson. If they can corrupt institutions that prize themselves on strict standards, objectivity, and scientific proof, what can't they do?
Right. As well as corrupt the institutions that claim to know everything about God.
Yeah.
Right?
And they do that too. It's amazing. They've tarred and feathered God and send him out to pasture, basically. Or her. I don't mean to be.
And the religions and the followers of those religions. No one's safe. So we have 6 questions for him. We have a trend developing over the years, if you will, where I think we started out when channelings with 10, 11, 12 questions, and we'd squeeze them in less than 2 hours or so, and now we're down to 5 questions, and it's not unusual for us to have a 2-hour plus channeling. And kudos to you for your staying power through all of this. But we do have six questions, and it's potentially going to be a long haul here. The answers are usually quite long and quite detailed, and sometimes venture off into areas not even directly related to the question. But we're still learning things. We're still looking at stuff from a variety of different perspectives. And hopefully the questions are good enough so that we get new material. I mean, that's not really up to us. We've found out.
Yes, well, they have to confine their answers to the context of who is asking, and that's me personally, not just you imposing and asking the question. It's filtered through me, so I'm a choke point, and it's a function of our level of belief and our existing knowledge base that will govern what can come through, because they can't lead, meaning they can't jump way out in front and guide us to something we have no idea is true or exists. So we have to be close to the truth in some way and then pose a penetrating question to get that next deeper insight about it. But if we come very naive, they're not going to give us chapter and verse and details and an encyclopedic knowledge. I wish that could be. I'd be done. I'd have all these years I've been doing this. I would have covered the necessary ground. But they can't lead. So it's a human endeavor. So it is totally dependent on our questions and who we are coming to the well and plunging the bucket down and seeing what we bring up. So I always want more. And so that's a nice intention to hold. Tell us more of what we need to know so we can do this better and inform people in ways that will help them see truth.
Right.
That's our goal.
And the other thing we probably should give a high head nod to, especially for people just encountering Get Wisdom in this channeling series, is that they invariably go to what I call the house on fire analogy. What they go to is analogous to the house on fire thing. Is that humans have a problem. We're being overloaded by a group of dark ETs that have nefarious plans for us, and namely to wipe us out. And so they're warning us about this at every opportunity, and they're also helping us to get a better understanding about what we need to do and why we need to do it in the way that they're suggesting we do it. And so that comes up too, and that's almost without fail, and that's usually addressed in more than one question. That very issue, especially we get it towards the end, because they want to leave us with an impression that that might inspire us to action. I think, they care deeply about what happens to us.
They do indeed. And we're the boots on the ground. The success or failure of the human enterprise and the human race as we know it is up to us, the ones who are here. not the ones in the light now. And it's not up to God. Everyone is watching, creator included, to see how we do. And our charter is to solve the problem of evil. So what we're doing today will give us a nice entree into the discussion of how evil works and how it's orchestrated and manifested in different ways, and how things are controlled, and how we make it possible through our institutions and our acquiescence to the way things are, and a complacency that is another big tool of the darkness to make people just kind of shrug their shoulders. Well, what else is new?
Yeah.
We always knew there was a bunch of BS and those people are all incompetent. But I got to go. I got a TV program to watch, and people don't get riled up. They don't try to on those realizations. It's sad, but it's really the case that most people are on the sidelines. They're not involved.
Yeah.
They might think they are, but it's more vicarious. They kind of tune in to watch the follies,
Yeah.
What's going on with politics and all that, and then they grouse and complain to their spouses and so on, but no one really does anything.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what needs to change a bit.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We got 6 questions for him. There's a little intro that you will have seen to learn a little bit more about this fellow. I tried to refrain from too many economic terms in the questions, and there's only one in here that's kind of goes in that direction. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. So shall we go ahead and start?
All right, I will do my thing as a channeler to connect to his energy in the light. And I do it through Creator for accuracy and for safety. Most channelers do not operate that way, and they're co-opted very quickly when they're just kind of fledgling seekers reaching out with their intuitive sensing and their psychic ability, and they're unguarded, and immediately they're spotted, typically by extraterrestrials. And someone will come and talk to them and pretend to be a lofty divine figure that they're maybe wanting to connect to. And this develops a relationship. And once they have that handshake, they become a kind of captive of that darkness, and they get rewarded. They get some sugar-coated information and some spiritual lore that's recycled for their benefit. Because the aliens know us backwards and forwards, and they can talk about anything and pull it off. People are unsuspecting. They're too trusting. So I'm making this comment as just a caution, because we've been told for years now that more than 90% of channelers are being duped. They're not channeling who they say. This is the big name people with big followings. It's sad. It's unfortunate. And they mean well, so, but what can I do? I mean, I'm just privy to this information, and I've seen it firsthand, and I know how the darkness works. They've come at me. So this I'm not exaggerating. This is a serious issue. And it's the problem with all institutions. They're all corrupted in various ways. And even some of my knowledge is corruption I don't know yet. It's just I've accepted it at face value, because this is what else do we have but the teachers around us and the information flow and all of it. So I will connect now, and he will announce when he is on board.
Okay, thank you.
This is Murray Rothbard speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Were there any unusual circumstances regarding your death, and were you able to transition successfully?
My death was a bit of a struggle for me, but nothing unusual in Earth terms. my transition was impeded. And this is not uncommon either. And the reason for this struggle was the fact I was not as spiritually connected and devoted to that connection as would have been ideal. This is a cautionary tale for anyone hearing these words. You are no different than I. You are flesh and blood. I was once. You came from the divine, as did I, and you will be returning to the divine, as I have. The question is, what will you do in the interim? If you are like me and skeptical, more cynical in respect to the idea of the divine realm, the reality of God in existence, and as a reason behind all that is existing we know of, you will be on your own and marching alone. Except you will be surrounded by interlopers, all with different agendas and designs on you and your energy, seeking to co-opt you and to diminish you and ultimately kill you off. That is a lot to take on as an individual, fighting foes that are invisible, that work indirectly and actually have control over you to a very large extent. This the world does not perceive as reality. They see the signs everywhere, but attribute it to human flaws, human failings, and natural forces, when none of this is natural, arbitrary, or random. Everything is done with an intention for something bad to happen ultimately. Even when you are encouraged and rewarded by those around you, eventually there will be a circumstance that arises that will pull the rug out from under you. So it is like a roller coaster ride. You reach the heights, but you will also feel the depths, and the plunge downward will be quite unpleasant. I had my innings in between the earth and the heavens. This is a very drastic development for the unprepared. If you think about the plight of the atheist being alone and friendless with respect to divine energies, when you leave the earth and leave it all behind and are in existence with no sensory input whatsoever, in a dark void, very akin to being buried alive, except you don't feel the dirt pressing in around you. You feel nothing. And are then likely set upon by dark beings to torment and torture you as you are defenseless and without any resources you know of to cope with this dilemma. This is the direst of circumstances one can imagine. At least as a physical being, there is only so much torture the body can withstand, and eventually it will pass away. When you are in limbo and in the void, you cannot die because you are immortal. This means you can be tormented and tortured until the end of time. if something does not intervene. If you lack the wherewithal to save yourself, you would be well served in knowing someone who is spiritual or religious who might pray for you. This is not because you are banished by God. You banished yourself in adopting the perspectives that God does not exist. This is a choice you are allowed, and you can make the worst of it in accepting that worldview. That's all well and good when you have friends and family and compatriots who care about you. You have a tribe, so to speak, or at least a family group, or at least a life partner in most cases. When you are left with nothing because you move into another dimension, everything is gone. It is all washed away. If you've been spiritual, you will have that link to God. You will have a divine outreach always. But if you are not a believer and not in the habit of cultivating a partnership with the divine, your lack of awareness might include the outreach from the divine seeking to guide you home when you expire. That is what happened to me. I was rescued. And to be rescued is the greatest of gifts one could have. You can learn to give this to others who are struggling as we speak now. Not all have been reached who are in limbo. That is a huge enterprise of its own because so many fall by the wayside through their own lack of alignment. You can speak for them and help to raise them up. The divine will act on your requests because you are on the human side, and that is what is needed for them to step in. We are in charge of the world, and yet we are largely in ignorance of the plight of those who are departed but in limbo. They need to be prayed for, and they need to have healing. The Lightworker Healing Protocol devised by your channel, based initially on work of some others, recognizing some of these basic phenomena, has refined it to the point almost anyone can use it and accomplish miracles. This is what is needed for people to awaken to the reality that your physical existence, you know, is transitory, is but one brief chapter in a continuing saga that is your life in coming and going from the earth back to the heavens. Some do not make it back, and that is the closest thing to hell you can ever experience.
Okay, thank you. Your work was monumental in its scope and clarity, and it was said you could practically write an entire book without the need of any serious editing. To what do you attribute this talent, and how was it developed in your early years? And what were the contributions to your talents from your previous incarnations?